I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Congressman David Cicilline voiced his support for the Active Shooter Alert Act on the House floor Tuesday. The Rhode Island Democrat compared the Active Shooter Alert, which has bipartisan support, to an Amber Alert. Law enforcement would be able to send smartphone users a notification that an active shooter was in the area. This comes as a group of senators are negotiating a bipartisan gun reform package. Listen in for more from Cicilline's remarks.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this bill, H.R. 6538, the Active Shooter Alert Act, bipartisan legislation which I introduced with Congressman Upton and 16 other original Republican and Democratic co-sponsors to help keep our communities safer in the event of an active shooter. Between 2000 and 2020, there were close to 400 active shooter events, including 40 active shooter incidents in 2020 and 61 such incidents in 2021 alone. In 2016, in Congressman Upton's backyard, we saw a Michigan Uber driver go on a shooting rampage and then continue picking up passengers. In 2019, a shooter drove around a community in Texas, killing 7 and wounding 25 people. And in 2021, a shooter traveled 30 miles, murdering 8 people at various Atlanta area spas. And just this past April, a shooter attacked a subway station full of people in Brooklyn and was then on the run for 24 hours before police finally detained him. Such active shooter situations have become ubiquitous, so frequent that some of these horrific events barely make headlines. This is not normal, and we cannot let it become normalized. We cannot become numb to these events or settle for the status quo. We need to act now to make our communities safer, and that includes providing law enforcement with every tool they need to do so. And law enforcement has asked for ways to better alert their communities when active shooter incidents arise. This legislation answers that call. The Active Shooter Alert creates an Amber Alert-like program for active shooter events. This bill will provide law enforcement with cutting-edge technology to send notifications to our smartphones and let communities know if there's an active shooter in a certain area so they know to stay away. The bill also instructs the Department of Justice to consult with police safety experts, including officers who have responded to these incidents, to develop best practices and protocols for sending out these alerts. This will allow law enforcement to learn from each other as they adapt this alert system to the needs of the communities if they so choose. Developing this kind of technology and infrastructure and identifying best practices would be a massive undertaking for many local police departments, and some communities simply don't have the resources to do it on their own. However, we already have these resources at the federal level. This legislation simply gives every law enforcement agency across the country the option to access the federal alert system so they can send alerts in their area. Nothing in this bill is mandatory for law enforcement agencies to adopt, but it will provide access to an important tool for law enforcement departments across the country, regardless of their size or location. And it's sadly becoming more and more necessary to have these protocols in place. As we've seen time and time again, when there's an active shooter situation, law enforcement does all they can to keep people in the surrounding area safe, including going door to door to either evacuate or tell people to shelter in place. But that takes time that could cost lives. More than anyone, law enforcement understands the strain an active shooter puts on a community in an ongoing crisis. In these stressful life or death situations, law enforcement are too often, in many cases, relying on social media to communicate with the surrounding community so that no one accidentally walks into the line of fire, including other members of law enforcement. Law enforcement needs and deserves the best tools available, certainly better than Twitter, to communicate with their community. And if you look at the after-action reports in so many of these active shooter incidents, they all recognize that it would have been so helpful to have a way to quickly and safely communicate with other members of law enforcement or the local community about an active shooter. I am proud that this bill has the endorsement of law enforcement organizations across the country at the national, state, and local levels, and that it's a resoundingly bipartisan effort. Thank you to all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who have supported this common sense measure, and to Mr. Upton for leading this effort with me. I encourage a yes vote. And just to be clear, this is legislation endorsed by the National Sheriff's Association, the Fraternal Order of Police, the National Police Foundation, the National Association of Police Organizations, Major Cities Chiefs Association, National District Attorneys Associations, and many other local law enforcement agencies. So the men and women who are protecting our communities are saying they need this. It's bipartisan. I urge everyone to vote for it, and I reserve the balance of my time.